The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Discovery as it moved through the dark space toward the Kepler 442 system. Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the alien sun grow larger on the main screen. This was supposed to be a simple meeting, a chance for humans to make friends with a new alien race called the Valorians. Nobody expected trouble. Private Danny Carter sat in the back of the Marine Transport Bay, checking his rifle for the 10th time that morning. At 19 years old, he was the youngest soldier on the ship. The other Marines called him Kid, but not in a mean way. Danny had joined the Colonial Marines to help his family back on Earth's outer colonies. His mother worked 3 jobs just to pay for food, and his little sister needed medicine that cost more money than they had. The military promised good pay and a chance to see the galaxy. Danny thought it sounded better than staying home and working in the mines. The Discovery carried 47 people, including the crew, diplomats, and 12 Marines for protection. Lieutenant Kevin Hayes led the Marines. He was a good officer who cared about his men, but he had a quick temper when people disrespected humanity. The diplomatic team was led by Ambassador Patricia Cole, a smart woman who spoke 6 alien languages and had successfully made peace with 3 different species. As they approached the meeting point at Meridian Station, Danny felt nervous, but excited. This was his first time meeting aliens face to face. He had seen pictures and videos during training, but the Valorians looked nothing like humans. They were tall and thin with skin that looked like colored glass. Their skin could change colors based on how they felt, which seemed amazing to Danny. Meridian Station was a neutral place where different species could meet safely. It was big enough to hold several large ships and had meeting rooms designed for different types of aliens. The station's artificial gravity could be adjusted for each species, and the air could be changed to make everyone comfortable. The Valorian ship arrived 2 hours after the Discovery. It was beautiful and scary at the same time, looking like a giant crystal sword floating in space. The ship was 3 tons bigger than the human vessel and seemed to glow with its own light. Danny watched from a porthole as smaller Valorian shuttles came toward the station. Captain Morrison gathered his team in the main briefing room before they left for the station. "Remember, this is a diplomatic mission," he said, looking at each person carefully. "The Valorians are a proud warrior race. They value honor and strength above everything else. Be respectful, but don't let them push us around. We represent all of humanity today." Danny followed the other Marines as they walked through the stations corridors toward the main meeting hall. The place was huge, with ceilings so high Danny had to crane his neck to see the top. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to shimmer and change as they walked past. The meeting hall was set up with 2 long tables facing each other. The human delegation sat on one side while they waited for the Valorians to arrive. Danny stood at attention against the back wall with the other Marines, trying to look professional despite his racing heart. When the Valorians entered the room, Danny felt his breath catch in his throat. They were even more impressive in person than in the training videos. The aliens were at least 7 feet tall, with elegant features and skin that shifted between different shades of blue and silver. They moved with a grace that made them seem like they were dancing instead of walking. At the front of the Valorian group walked a female who was clearly their leader. Her skin was a deeper blue than the others, and she wore clothing that looked like it was made from liquid metal. This had to be Princess Zarathis, heir to the Valorian throne. Her eyes were large and completely black, and when she looked around the room, Danny felt like she could see right through him. Ambassador Cole stood up and began the formal greetings, speaking in what Danny assumed was the Valorian language. Her words sounded like music mixed with the sound of wind chimes. Princess Zarathis replied in perfect English, her voice clear and strong. "We welcome the humans to this meeting," the princess said. "We hope this day will bring understanding between our peoples." For the first hour, everything went well. The two sides exchanged gifts and talked about trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Danny relaxed a little, thinking this diplomatic stuff was easier than everyone said it would be. Then things went wrong. One of the Valorian nobles, a tall male with silver skin, made a comment about human technology being primitive compared to Valorian science. He spoke in a tone that made it clear he thought humans were stupid and weak. Lieutenant Hayes's face turned red, and Danny could see the anger building in his commanding officer's eyes. "Primitive?" Hayes said, standing up from his chair. "Our primitive technology got us across the galaxy to meet you. Maybe if your people spent less time looking down on others and more time actually exploring, you would have found us first." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. The Valorian noble's skin shifted to a dark red color that Danny instinctively knew meant anger. Princess Zarathis held up her hand to stop the noble from speaking, but the damage was already done. "You dare insult the Valorian Empire?" the princess asked, her voice like ice. Her skin was now a deep crimson that seemed to glow with its own light. "Your officer has brought dishonor to this meeting." Ambassador Cole tried to smooth things over, but Princess Zarathis was not interested in apologies. "According to Valorian law," she explained, "when one party insulted another during diplomatic meetings, the offended party could demand satisfaction through combat trials. The insulted party could choose any member of the opposing group to serve as their bonded warrior, fighting in ritualized combat until honor was restored." Danny felt his stomach drop as he realized what this meant. Someone from their group would have to fight Valorian warriors, and if they lost, they would become a slave for life. Princess Zarathis walked slowly in front of the human delegation, her black eyes examining each person carefully. She looked at Ambassador Cole, then at Captain Morrison, then at each of the Marines. Danny tried to stand perfectly still as her gaze moved down the line, but when she reached him, she stopped. The princess stared at Danny for what felt like forever. He looked back at her, refusing to look away, even though his heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. There was something in her eyes that he could not understand, a kind of curiosity mixed with something else. Finally, "Princess." Zarathis raised her hand and pointed directly at Danny. Her voice carried across the silent room like a bell tolling. "He belongs to me." Danny felt like the floor had disappeared from under his feet when Princess Zarathis pointed at him. The words, "he belongs to me," echoed in his head as the reality of his situation hit him. He was going to be taken away from his ship, his friends, and everything he knew. Captain Morrison started to protest, but Ambassador Cole put a hand on his arm and shook her head. They all knew that interfering now would mean war between humans and Valorians. Lieutenant Hayes looked like he wanted to fight the entire Valorian delegation with his bare hands, but Danny caught his eye and nodded slightly. The young Marine understood that accepting this fate might be the only way to keep the peace. His hands were shaking, but he stepped forward and stood at attention in front of the princess. "I accept," Danny said, his voice stronger than he felt inside. Princess Zarathis studied him with those deep black eyes. "You are brave for one so young," she said. "What is your name, human warrior?" "Private Danny Carter, ma'am." "You will come with us to the Sovereign Dawn. There you will learn what it means to be a bonded warrior of the Valorian Empire." The next few hours passed like a bad dream. Danny was allowed to pack his personal belongings and say goodbye to his fellow Marines. Lieutenant Hayes pulled him aside before he left. "Listen to me, kid," Hayes said quietly. "You're stronger than you know. These aliens might think they own you, but they don't own your spirit. Remember your training, keep your head up, and find a way to come home. Captain Morrison shook Danny's hand and promised that the human fleet would not abandon him. "We'll find a way to get you back," the captain said. "I give you my word." Danny nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He shouldered his bag and followed the Valorian guards to their shuttle. As the small ship carried him away from the Discovery, he watched his home ship grow smaller until it disappeared among the stars. The Valorian flagship was unlike anything Danny had ever seen. The corridors were wide and tall, with walls that seemed to be made of living metal that shifted and flowed as he walked past. The gravity felt different too, lighter than Earth normal, but heavier than the Discovery. Strange lights moved along, the walls like glowing rivers, providing a soft blue illumination that made everything look dreamlike. Danny's quarters were larger than his entire bunk space on the human ship. The bed was too big for him, and the ceiling was so high he felt like he was living inside a cathedral. There was a window that showed the stars outside, and Danny spent his first night staring out at the endless darkness, wondering if he would ever see home again. The next morning, a Valorian guard came to take him to meet his trainer. Danny followed the alien through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past rooms filled with technology he could not understand. Other Valorians stopped to stare at him as he passed. Some looked curious, others seemed amused, and a few appeared disgusted by his presence. The training room was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched up into shadows. Weapon racks lined the walls, filled with swords, spears, and other devices that Danny did not recognize. In the center of the room stood the largest Valorian Danny had seen yet. His skin was a dark gray color, marked with scars, and his black eyes held no warmth at all. "I am Commander Kekstar," the alien said in heavily accented English. "I will prepare you for the trials, though I suspect it will be a waste of time. Humans are weak creatures, and you are just a child." Danny felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting mad would not help him survive. Instead, he stood at attention and waited for orders. "Commander." Kekstar handed him a training sword made of some kind of energy that hummed when he touched it. "Show me what you know about combat." The commander said Danny had learned basic sword fighting during Marine training, but it was nothing compared to what Commander Kekstar could do. The Valorian moved like flowing water, his blades seeming to be everywhere at once. Within seconds, Danny was on his back with the energy sword at his throat. "Pathetic," Commander Kekstar said. "How do humans ever win battles?" Danny got back to his feet and tried again, and again, and again. For 3 hours, Commander Kekstar knocked him down over and over, each time making comments about human weakness and stupidity. By the end of the session, Danny was covered in bruises and could barely stand. "Return tomorrow," Commander Kekstar said. "Perhaps you will live longer than 10 seconds." As Danny limped back to his quarters, he passed a large window that looked out into space. Princess Zarathis stood there, watching the stars. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "How was your first training session?" she asked. "Educational," Danny replied, trying to keep the pain out of his voice. The princess almost smiled. "Commander Kekstar is the finest warrior in the Empire. He has never lost a battle. Most of our young warriors train for years before they can last 5 minutes against him." "How long do I have to prepare for the trials?" 1 month, Princess Zarathis said. 3 trials await you. If you win all 3, you may return to your people with honor restored. If you lose even one, you will serve the Empire for the rest of your life." Danny nodded. A month to learn what Valorian warriors spent years mastering. The odds were not good, but he had to try. Over the following days, Danny threw himself into training with everything he had. Commander Kekstar worked him harder than any drill instructor back home, but slowly Danny began to improve. He could not match the Valorian strength or speed, But he started to notice patterns in how his opponent moved. The commander seemed surprised when Danny began lasting longer. In their practice fights, you learned quickly for a human, Kekstar admitted after Danny managed to avoid being knocked down for a full minute. Humans are good at adapting, Danny said, breathing hard. Adapting? Changing our approach when something doesn't work. Finding new ways to solve problems. Commander Kekstar looked thoughtful. Valorians perfect our techniques over centuries. We do not change what has been proven effective. Maybe that's why I'm still surprising you? Danny said with a small smile. To Danny's amazement, the grim commander actually laughed. Perhaps there is more to humans than I thought. As the days passed, Danny noticed that Princess Zarathis often came to watch his training sessions. She would stand in the observation area above the training floor, her skin shifting through different shades of blue and purple as she watched him fight. Sometimes she would speak quietly with Commander Kekstar afterward, though Danny could not hear what they discussed. One evening, the princess came to his quarters. Danny scrambled to his feet when she entered, not sure of the proper protocol for entertaining alien royalty. Sit, she said, taking a chair across from him. I want to understand something. Why did you volunteer to come with us? Your captain was ready to fight rather than give you up. Danny thought about the question. Because fighting would have meant war. People would have died. Maybe millions of people. One life isn't worth that much destruction. Princess Zarathis stared at him with those unreadable black eyes. In Valorian culture, we believe that honor is worth any price. A warrior who allows himself to be taken without fighting is considered a coward. Maybe, Danny said, but I'd rather be called a coward than be responsible for starting a war. Your people think differently than mine, the princess said softly. Her skin had shifted to a pale silver color that Danny was beginning to associate with thoughtfulness. Different doesn't mean wrong, Danny replied. Princess Zarathis was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, What is your family like? Danny talked about his mother and sister, about the struggles they faced on the outer colonies, and about his dreams of making enough money to give them a better life. The princess listened without interrupting, her expression growing more thoughtful as he spoke. You fight not for glory or honor, but for love, she said when he finished. I guess so. Is that strange? For a Valorian, yes. We fight for the Empire, for our bloodlines, for our place in history. But you fight for two people who will never know if you live or die in these trials. Danny had not thought about it that way, but she was right. His family would probably never learn what happened to him out here among the stars. They'll know, he said finally. Somehow they'll know that I did my best. Princess Zarathis stood to leave, but paused at the door. Commander Kekstar tells me you are learning faster than he expected. Perhaps there is hope for you yet, Danny Carter. After she left, Danny sat alone in his oversized room, staring out at the stars and thinking about home. He had 3 weeks left to prepare for trials that would determine the rest of his life. But for the first time since arriving on the Valorian ship, he felt like he might actually have a chance. The day of the first trial arrived faster than Danny expected. He woke up feeling sick to his stomach, knowing that everything he had worked for over the past month would be tested today. Commander Kekstar came to his quarters early in the morning, carrying a set of ceremonial armor that had been sized for Danny's smaller human frame. This belonged to a young Valorian warrior who died honorably in battle, the commander said as he helped Danny put on the armor. Perhaps his spirit will guide you today. The armor was made of the same living metal as the ship's walls, and it felt warm against Danny's skin. It was lighter than he expected, but seemed to strengthen his movements rather than restrict them. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Remember what I taught you, Commander Kekstar said, as they walked toward the Grand Colosseum. Do not try to fight like a Valorian. Fight like a human, whatever that means. The Grand Colosseum was built inside the largest section of the Sovereign Dawn. Thousands of Valorians filled the seats that rose up toward the ceiling in circular rows. Danny had never seen so many aliens in one place, and the noise of their voices created a sound like rushing water. As he entered the arena floor, the crowd grew quiet. Princess Zarathus sat in the royal viewing box. Her skin, a deep blue color that Danny had learned, meant she was trying to hide her emotions. She wore a crown made of crystalline spikes that caught the arena lights and threw rainbow patterns across her face. When their eyes met across the distance, she nodded once. Danny's opponent entered from the opposite side of the arena. Torgan the Crusher was the largest Valorian Danny had ever seen, standing at least 8 feet tall with skin that had turned permanently black from countless battles. His muscles looked like they were carved from stone, and when he walked, the arena floor seemed to shake under his feet. The crowd cheered when they saw Torgan, chanting his name in their musical language. Danny felt very small standing in the center of the arena, but he forced himself to stand straight and keep his fear hidden. Referee announced the rules in both Valorian and English. The fighters would use traditional energy blades, and the trial would continue until one warrior could no longer fight. Danny gripped his weapon tighter, feeling the energy hum through the metal. When the starting signal sounded, Torgan charged across the arena like an avalanche. Danny barely had time to dodge to one side as the massive alien's blade swept through the space where his head had been a moment before. The crowd roared with excitement. For the first few minutes, Danny could do nothing but run and dodge. Torgan was incredibly fast for someone so large, and his blade work was perfect. Every attack came exactly where it was supposed to, following the classical Valorian fighting forms that Commander Kekstar had shown him, but that predictability gave Danny an idea. If Torgan always followed the same patterns, then maybe Danny could use that against him. Instead of trying to match the Valorian's strength, Danny began to focus on being where Torgan did not expect him to be. When Torgan swung high, Danny dropped low and rolled between the giant's legs. When the Valorian expected him to retreat, Danny moved forward inside his opponent's reach. It was not elegant, and it was not honorable by Valorian standards, but it was working. The crowd began to murmur as they realized the small human was not losing as quickly as expected. Danny could see confusion in Torgan's black eyes as his perfect techniques failed to connect. The giant warrior started to make mistakes, swinging too hard and leaving himself off balance. Then Danny noticed something else. The arena's artificial gravity generators created slight variations across the fighting surface, probably too small for most people to notice. But Danny had grown up on a colony where the gravity generators were always breaking down, and he had learned to feel even tiny changes in gravitational pull. Danny began timing his movements to use these gravity variations. When he needed extra speed, he moved toward the lighter areas. When he needed to change direction quickly, he used the heavier zones to give him more traction. To the crowd, it looked like the human was dancing across the arena floor. Torgan grew frustrated and started making bigger mistakes. During one wild swing, he left his side completely open. Danny saw his chance and struck, his energy blade cutting through the giant's armor and drawing first blood. The arena fell completely silent. Torgan the Crusher, who had never lost a battle, stood staring at the small cut on his arm where human blood would have been flowing. Instead, Valorian blood glowed with a soft blue light as it dripped to the arena floor. Danny stepped back and lowered his weapon, showing that he would not continue attacking a defeated opponent. This gesture of mercy surprised the crowd even more than his victory had. The referee announced Danny's victory, and the crowd erupted in confused cheering. Some Valorians seemed angry that their champion had lost, but others appeared genuinely Impressed by the human's fighting style, Princess Zarathis stood in her viewing box, and Danny could see that her skin had shifted to a pale gold color that he did not recognize. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the arena. The human has won the first trial through skill and honor. The second trial will be held in 3 days. Back in his quarters that night, Danny was surprised when Commander Kekstar came to visit him. The scarred warrior sat down across from Danny and studied him with new respect. "How did you do it?" the commander asked. "Torgan has defeated warriors with decades more experience than you." Danny explained about the gravity variations and how he had used them to his advantage. Commander Kekstar listened thoughtfully. "You notice something that we have never seen," the commander said. "Our architects designed this arena centuries ago, but no Valorian warrior has ever thought to use the gravity fields as part of their strategy. You fought with your mind as much as your body. Is that cheating?" "No," Commander Kekstar said firmly. "It is brilliant. You used every advantage available to you, just as a true warrior should. I am beginning to understand why Princess Zarathis chose you." 3 days later, Danny faced his second trial. This time, the test was not pure combat, but a combination of fighting skills, intelligence, and strategy. He was placed in a holographic maze filled with traps, puzzles, and combat challenges. His opponent was Lady Vishara, the Valorian Empire's greatest strategic mind. The maze was like a 3-dimensional chess game where the pieces could kill you. Danny had to navigate through shifting corridors while solving complex puzzles, fighting holographic enemies. Lady Vishara moved through her own version of the maze, and whichever contestant reached the center first would win. Lady Vishara was methodical and logical, approaching each challenge with careful analysis and proven techniques. She moved steadily through the maze, solving each puzzle with mathematical precision. Danny took a completely different approach. When he encountered a locked door with a complex mechanism, instead of trying to solve the lock like Lady Vishara would, he looked for another way around. He climbed walls that were not meant to be climbed, squeezed through gaps that seemed too small, and found shortcuts that the maze designers had never intended. When he faced the holographic enemies, Danny did not fight them according to traditional combat rules. He used the maze's own traps against the enemies, led them into dead ends, and found ways to make them fight each other instead of fighting him. His human intuition told him to take risks that no logical Valorian would consider. When he came to a chasm that seemed impossible to cross, Danny noticed that the holographic walls had different thicknesses. He guessed that some of the barriers might not be solid, and literally jumped through what looked like solid rock. He was right. The wall was just a visual illusion, and Danny found himself in a hidden passage that led directly toward the maze's center. Lady Vishara was still working on a complex mathematical puzzle when Danny reached the center of the maze and claimed victory. The watching Valorians were stunned. Their greatest strategic mind had been defeated by a human who seemed to make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. Princess Zarathis announced Danny's victory with what sounded like pride in her voice. Her skin had turned the same pale gold color as after the first trial, and Danny was beginning to think that color meant she was pleased. That night, the princess came to his quarters to congratulate him personally. She seemed different, more relaxed than he had ever seen her. "2 victories," she said, sitting across from him. "My people are beginning to talk about you as more than just a curiosity. Some are calling you the human who thinks sideways. Is that good or bad?" "It is remarkable," she said. "Valorians pride ourselves on our logical minds and perfect techniques. But you have shown us that sometimes the best solution is not the obvious one. You have taught us something new." Danny felt a strange warmth at her praise, but then reality set in. "What's the third trial?" Princess Zarathis' expression grew serious, and her skin shifted to a darker blue. "You will face my brother, Prince Kelthon. He is the greatest warrior in the Empire and heir to our military command. This trial will be fought to first blood with live weapons." "Has he ever lost?" "Never," the princess said quietly. "Danny, you have already done more than anyone expected. If you want to, yield now before the final trial." The morning of the final trial felt different from the others. Danny woke up before dawn and found himself unable to eat the breakfast that had been brought to his quarters. His stomach was twisted in knots, and his hands kept shaking no matter how hard he tried to control them. Today he would face Prince Kelthon, and everyone knew this would be the trial that decided everything. Commander Kextar arrived early to help Danny prepare. The old warrior's expression was grim as he checked Danny's armor and weapons one final time. "I have trained you as well as I can in 1 month," the commander said, "but I will not lie to you. Prince Kelthon is everything a Valorian warrior should be. He is faster than Torgan, smarter than Lady Vishara, and he has never shown mercy to an opponent." "Have you fought him before?" Danny asked. "Once during a training exercise when he was younger. He defeated me in less than 2 minutes. That was 10 years ago, and he has only grown stronger since then." Danny nodded, trying to push down the fear that was rising in his chest. "Any advice for fighting someone who's better than me in every way?" Commander Kextar was quiet for a moment, then looked Danny in the eyes. "Fight like a human. You have shown us twice now that human thinking is different from ours. Trust in that difference." As they walked toward the Grand Colosseum, Danny noticed that even more Valorians had gathered to watch than before. Word of the humans' victories had spread throughout the fleet, and aliens packed every available space in the viewing areas. The noise of their voices was almost overwhelming. Princess Zarathis sat in the royal viewing box again, but this time she was not alone. Next to her sat an older Valorian who Danny assumed was the Emperor, her father. The Emperor's skin was a deep purple color, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had ruled an empire for centuries. When Prince Kelthon entered the arena, Danny understood immediately why the Valorians considered him their greatest warrior. The prince was tall even by Valorian standards, with perfect proportions and skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural athlete, and his confidence was visible in every step. The prince's armor was magnificent, covered in decorations that spoke of countless victories. His energy blade hummed with power, and Danny could see that it was longer and more advanced than the weapons used in the previous trials. This was not just ceremonial combat gear, but the equipment of a true warrior. The crowd fell silent as the 2 fighters took their positions in the center of the arena. Danny felt very small standing across from Prince Kelthon, but he forced himself to meet the prince's gaze without flinching. "You have fought well in the previous trials, Prince," Kelthon said, his voice carrying clearly across the arena. "But now you face the heir to the Valorian military command. Prepare yourself, human warrior." The starting signal sounded, and Prince Kelthon attacked with breathtaking speed. Danny barely got his blade up in time to block the first strike, and the force of the impact sent vibrations up his arms. The prince followed immediately with a second attack, then a third, pressing Danny backward across the arena floor. Danny had thought Torgan was fast, but Prince Kelthon was in a different class entirely. His blade seemed to be everywhere, at once striking from angles that should have been impossible. Danny could do nothing but defend, blocking and dodging desperately as the prince's attacks came faster and faster. The crowd roared its approval as their prince dominated the fight. Danny's arms were already getting tired from blocking the powerful strikes, and he knew he could not keep this up much longer. He had to find a way to change the pattern of the fight. Danny tried the same tactics that had worked against Torgan. But Prince Kelvin was too smart to fall for predictable moves. When Danny rolled to one side, the prince was already there, waiting for him. When Danny tried to use the gravity variations, the prince countered by controlling the distance and timing of their engagement. For 10 minutes, Danny was driven steadily backward across the arena. His armor was scored with near misses, and he could feel exhaustion creeping into his muscles. Prince Kelvin seemed as fresh as when the fight began, his breathing still steady and controlled. Then Danny realized something that chilled him to the bone. Prince Kelvin was not fighting at full strength. The prince was holding back, drawing out the fight to make it more entertaining for the crowd. This was not a desperate battle for the prince, but a demonstration of Valorian superiority. That realization sparked something angry inside Danny. He was not some toy to be played with for the crowd's amusement. If he was going to lose, he would make Prince Kelvin work for the victory. Danny changed his strategy completely. Instead of trying to match the prince's perfect technique, he began fighting with pure human stubbornness. When the prince expected him to retreat, Danny pressed forward recklessly. When logic said he should defend, Danny attacked with everything he had. This change surprised Prince Kelvin enough that Danny managed to land his first real blow of the fight, his blade scraping across the prince's armor and leaving a visible mark. The crowd gasped, and Danny saw surprise flicker across the prince's face. Now Prince Kelvin began fighting seriously, and Danny realized how hopeless his situation truly was. The prince's blade work became a thing of beauty, each movement flowing perfectly into the next. Danny's desperate attacks were turned aside effortlessly, and he found himself being systematically worn down. As the fight continued, Danny began to see patterns in the prince's attacks. Prince Kelvin was too perfect, too controlled. Every move followed the ideal Valorian fighting forms, executed with flawless technique. And in that perfection, Danny began to see a possibility. If he could get the prince to commit to one perfect, classical attack, there might be a split second where Danny could respond with something completely unexpected. It would require perfect timing and incredible luck, but it was his only chance. Danny began deliberately leaving small openings in his defense, trying to tempt Prince Kelvin into making the kind of finishing move that would end the fight. The prince was too experienced to fall for obvious traps, but gradually Danny managed to create a situation where only one classical response would make sense. Prince Kelvin saw the opening and moved to take it, his blade sweeping in the perfect arc for a killing blow. For just a moment, the prince was committed to his attack and could not change course. Danny had one chance. He could dodge to the side and try to strike at the prince's exposed flank. If he succeeded, he might actually win the trial and earn his freedom. But as he began to move, Danny realized something horrible. The angle of his strike would not just wound Prince Kelvin. At the speed they were both moving, with the power behind Danny's desperate attack, his blade would go deep enough to cause serious injury. Danny might win the trial, but he would also severely hurt or possibly kill Princess Zarathi's brother. Time seemed to slow down. 3 months had passed since the trials ended, and Danny still sometimes could not believe how much his life had changed. He stood in his new office aboard the joint human-Valorian station that orbited between both fleets, looking out at ships from 2 different worlds working together. The station was a marvel of cooperation, built with human engineering and Valorian technology working in harmony. Danny's role as the first human liaison to the Valorian Empire kept him busy from dawn until late at night. Every day brought new challenges as the 2 species learned to work together. Sometimes it was technical problems, like figuring out how to make human computers talk to Valorian systems. Other times it was cultural misunderstandings that threatened to turn minor disagreements into major conflicts. But Danny was good at his job. His time as Princess Zarathi's bonded warrior had taught him to understand both human and Valorian. Thinking. He could see when humans were being too direct and offending Valorian concepts of honor. And he could tell when Valorians were being too rigid and frustrating human creativity. Princess Zarathis had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Valorian diplomatic forces, making her responsible for all relationships with alien species. She worked closely with Danny on every major decision, and their partnership had become the foundation for the growing alliance between their peoples. This morning brought a particularly difficult challenge. A group of Valorian nobles had arrived at the station, demanding an audience with the princess. They represented the old guard of the Empire, aliens who believed that working with humans was beneath Valorian dignity. Danny knew that this meeting could undo months of careful progress. Princess Zarathis met Danny in the main conference room before the nobles arrived. Her skin was a dark blue color that told him she was stressed and trying to hide it. Lord, Commander Velther leads this delegation, she said quietly. He was one of my father's most trusted advisors, and he believes that our alliance with humanity makes the Empire look weak. He wants me to end all cooperation and return to the old ways of conquest. What does your father think? Danny asked. The Emperor supports our alliance, but he is old and his health is failing. If something happens to him, Lord Commander Velther could influence my brother to change our policies. Prince Kelthan respects you personally, but he still thinks like a traditional Valorian warrior. Danny nodded, understanding the political situation. What do you need me to do? Be yourself, Princess Zarathis said with a slight smile. Show them what humans can offer that they cannot get anywhere else. When the Valorian delegation entered the conference room, Danny felt the temperature seem to drop. Lord Commander. Velther was ancient even by Valorian standards. His skin a permanent gray color that spoke of centuries of warfare. The other nobles with him looked at Danny with barely concealed disgust. So this is the human pet that has corrupted our princess. Lord Commander Velther said without any greeting. I expected something more impressive. Danny felt his temper rise, but forced himself to remain calm. Getting angry would only prove the old noble's point about humans being primitive and emotional. I am Danny Carter, human liaison to the Valorian Empire, he said formally. I welcome you to our joint station. Your station? Lord Commander Velther's skin shifted to an angry red. This abomination should never have been built. Valorians do not need human assistance with anything. Princess Zarathis started to respond, but Danny held up his hand slightly. He had an idea that might work better than arguing. You are absolutely right, Danny said, surprising everyone in the room. Valorians do not need human assistance. Your technology is more advanced. Your warriors are stronger, and your empire has conquered more territory than humans could dream of. Lord Commander Velther looked suspicious at this easy agreement, but Danny continued. However, there are some things that Valorians and humans together can accomplish that neither could do alone. Would you like to see an example? Before the old noble could object, Danny activated a holographic display that filled the center of the conference room. It showed a three-dimensional map of a star system that neither species had been able to explore. This is the Nexus system, Danny explained. It contains resources that both our peoples need, but it is surrounded by a maze of asteroids that shift position constantly. Valorian ships are too large to navigate the maze safely, and human ships do not have shield strong enough to survive the radiation inside. The hologram zoomed in to show the details of the system. Dangerous asteroid fields moved in complex patterns around a central star that gave off deadly energy bursts. However, Danny continued, if we combine Valorian shield technology with human navigation systems and put small human pilots in modified Valorian ships, we can reach the resources safely. Neither species could do this alone. Lord Commander Velther studied the hologram with growing interest despite his obvious reluctance to admit that humans might be useful. "We have been trying to reach that system for 50 years, one of the other nobles admitted. "Our best navigators cannot predict the asteroid movements. Human computers are very good at calculating complex patterns," Danny said. "And human pilots are trained to react quickly to changing situations. We think differently than Valorians, which makes us useful for solving different kinds of problems." Princess Zarathis activated another display showing the successful joint missions that had already taken place. Human-Valorian teams had explored 12 new systems and established mining operations that benefited both species. "The alliance is not about one species helping the other," she said. "It is about both species becoming stronger together than either could be alone." Lord Commander Velther was quiet for a long time, studying the data. Finally, he looked directly at Danny. "You claim that human thinking is different from ours. Prove it," Danny thought quickly. He needed to demonstrate human problem-solving in a way that would impress traditional Valorian minds. "Give me a military problem that Valorian commanders have been unable to solve," he said. The old noble smiled coldly and activated his own holographic display. It showed a fortress built into an asteroid, protected by energy shields and defensive weapons. "Rebel forces have fortified this position and declared independence from the Empire. Our greatest military minds have studied this fortress for months, but every attack plan results in unacceptable casualties. How would humans solve this problem?" Danny studied the hologram carefully, looking at the fortress from every angle. The Valorian approach would be to attack directly with superior force, but the rebels had chosen their position well. Any frontal assault would be costly. Then Danny noticed something that the Valorian planners had overlooked. The fortress was built into a natural asteroid, which meant it was subject to the same gravitational forces as any other space rock. "You have been thinking of this as a fortress," Danny said slowly. "But what if you think of it as an asteroid that happens to have a fortress built into it?" He began manipulating the holographic controls, showing how small changes to the asteroid's orbit could be achieved using gravitational manipulation. If you use tractor beams to slowly alter the asteroid's rotation, you can create artificial earthquakes inside the fortress. The rebels will have to choose between maintaining their weapon systems or their structural integrity. Once the fortress is weakened, a small team could infiltrate and disable their defenses from the inside. The Valorian nobles stared at the display as Danny's plan unfolded. It was elegant, efficient, and would result in minimal casualties on both sides. "Brilliant," Lord Commander Velther said quietly. "We were so focused on the fortress that we forgot about the asteroid underneath it. Your human perspective allowed you to see what we missed." Princess Zarathis smiled. Her skin shifting to the golden color that Danny had learned meant she was pleased and proud. "This is why the Alliance benefits both our peoples," she said. "Humans and Valorians think differently, and those differences make us stronger when we work together." Over the following days, Lord Commander Velther and his delegation toured the joint station and observed human-Valorian teams working together on various projects. They saw human engineers improving Valorian technology and Valorian scientists helping humans understand advanced physics. By the end of their visit, even the most traditional nobles had to admit that the Alliance was producing remarkable results. Lord Commander Velther asked to speak privately with Danny before leaving. "I came here expecting to find a human who had weakened our princess with primitive thinking," the old noble said. "Instead, I found someone who has made her stronger and wiser. You have my support for this alliance." As the Valorian delegation departed, Princess Zarathis and Danny stood together on the observation deck, watching their ships disappear into hyperspace. "You handled that perfectly," the princess said. "Lord Commander Velther will return to the Empire and convince the other nobles that humans are valuable allies rather than weak dependence. "It was not hard," Danny replied. "I just showed them the truth. Humans and Valorians really are better together than apart." Princess Zarathes moved closer to him, and Danny felt his heart race the way it always did when she was near. Over the months they had worked together, their professional relationship had grown into something deeper,